Good morning, students. This is the continuation of the second part of my introductory course on describing diagrams. So please look at sheet number 2, which you already have, and we are going to look in more detail at each of the 4 diagrams at the top of the page. So first, let's look at diagram A. What we are going to do is to describe the details in the same way as you might if this was an exam. But in addition, we are also going to give some reasons for the figures. In IELTS, you are not asked to give any reasons for the figures that you can see in the diagram, but you may in other situations, so I think this can be useful to do. So looking at diagram A, the first thing we have to do is to distinguish between the different categories of information and then prioritize them. So how many categories do we have here? Okay, we have differences between men and women. We have 6 different countries, and we have the absolute figures of average life expectancy. So we have 3 categories. You now have to decide which are the most important categories and describe them first. And of course, you need to do an introduction. So just pause the audio for a moment and think about how you would start your essay. So I would begin it like this. Introduction. The bar chart shows the average age a man and woman can expect to live in 6 different countries. That's your first paragraph, which need only be 1 sentence. Then we need, I would say, 3 more paragraphs for the 3 categories of information. I would begin my second paragraph like this. We can see that the age at which men and women will die varies enormously between different countries and genders. It ranges from between 41 to 80. So this first paragraph just tells us how long men and women are, how long people will live, and gives us the range. These are the absolute numbers. Now you have to decide whether countries or genders are more significant for your third paragraph. To decide which are more important, you should look for big differences. We can see, for example, an enormous difference between Afghanistan and Australia and the USA. Almost twice as much. When we look at gender differences, they're relatively less significant. So I think we should look at country differences for our third paragraph. So we might begin something like this. Countries with the highest life expectancy were Australia and the USA, at between 72 to 80, and countries with the lowest life expectancy were Afghanistan and Burkina, with life expectancies between 41 and 49. China also had a relatively high life expectancy at between 68 and 71. I think there is no need to describe every country. Now we can go on to the last paragraph, looking at gender differences. What is the most important thing you can see in this diagram regarding gender differences in life expectancy? I think the important thing is we can see in all countries women that live longer than men. So I might begin this final paragraph. When it comes to gender differences, we can see that women expect to live longer than men in all countries, with the biggest difference probably being in the USA. In the USA, women live 7 years longer than men on average. Okay, so we have now described all the information. As a final paragraph, what do you think are the reasons for the differences between genders and the differences between countries? Understanding the significance of figures will make it easier for you to describe the diagram. So pause the audio briefly while you think about your answer. Let's talk about the differences between countries first of all. I think it should be fairly obvious that the highest life expectancies are in the more developed countries. So we can guess that the greater life expectancy is because improved quality of life and infrastructure, improved medical care. People are more wealthy and maybe they have more food to eat. And what about the differences between the sexes? This is probably due to men having more dangerous and stressful lives than women, doing jobs which involve more danger or stress. Okay, let's move on to diagram 2. This is a very simple diagram, so no need to discuss it for too long. There are only 2 categories of information: differences between countries and absolute numbers. So the introduction is, the diagram is a pie chart showing the number of people on average for each doctor in 5 different countries. Second paragraph, we can see that there is an enormous range between countries, ranging from 200 to almost 73,000 people per doctor. Next paragraph, the differences between countries is very substantial. The lowest country is Rwanda with almost 73,000 people to each doctor, and the lowest country is Latvia with only 200 people to each doctor. And reasons why this situation exists, I think we can guess that it's very similar to the reasons in diagram A. Rwanda and Nepal are far less developed countries, will have a poorer education, less professional people, therefore they're likely to have fewer doctors per patient. Now on to diagram C. Pause the audio briefly while you find out how many categories of information there are here. Okay, so we have differences between male and females, 5 different countries, and absolute numbers. So we have 3 categories of information. which do you think are the most significant? Well, interesting numbers are, for example, the differences between male and female in Africa, 38 to 61. This is something like a 30% difference. Differences between countries, again, Africa and Europe. If we take the average in Africa at around maybe 50%, then we can see that Europe is almost twice the level of Africa. So I think we should look at the differences between countries first. This seems to be the most significant. But let's start with an introduction. This bar chart shows differences in the reading and writing ability of males and females in 5 geographical areas. I say geographical areas here because these are not countries, except for maybe America, but Africa, Asia, Europe and Oceania are continents, or maybe even more than one continent. So geographical areas I think would be more appropriate here. So let's look at our first category. Firstly, we can see an enormous difference between countries in regard to literacy. This ranges from around 38% to almost 98%. The countries with the highest literacy rates, the areas with the highest literacy rates are America, Europe and Oceania, all having rates between around 90 to 98%. Notice that I use the present simple tense here. I say they have these rates because we have no dates on this diagram, so we have no time frame. We presume that it means in the present. And I just realized that I've missed out an important piece of information, which is to mention that these figures are only in regard to people over the age of 15. Once again, this emphasizes the need to look at the heading for the diagram very carefully. I notice this many times. Students often miss out some important information in the heading, so when they describe the diagram, it's not quite accurate. Now moving on to the differences between males and females. Perhaps the most important point to notice first is that males have a higher reading and writing ability in all countries. However, in the more developed countries, the difference is quite negligible, negligible, N-E-G-L-I-G-I-B-L-E, whereas in Africa the difference is very substantial, where males have a level higher by around 30%. Now moving on to our last diagram, diagram D. Pause the audio for a while, give yourself time to look at the categories and decide how to introduce this diagram. Okay, let's continue. This is a more complicated diagram than the other three, so you need to be more careful. So the introduction is the diagram shows 2 pie charts representing the number of people living in cities and rural areas in two different periods, or better to say actually 2 different years, because these are exact years. So how many categories of information do we have? First of all, we have urban and rural. Then we have developed and developing. And then we have the 2 different years. So I would say we have 3 categories of information here. And which should we describe first? I think with a fairly complicated diagram like this, you need to take out your pencil and start doing some quick calculations. So you need to calculate the percentages of people living in urban and rural areas in the 2 different periods, and maybe also developed and developing areas. So let's have a look at that. Looking at this diagram, I think the best strategy here is to draw lines between the identical areas in the 2 different years. So for example, if we draw a line from urban developing in 1990 to urban developing in 2025, then we can write on this line the percentage change. So from 25% to around 50%, we can say this is almost an increase of 100%. Similarly, if we draw a line from rural developing to 1990 to rural developing 2025, we can see a change of around minus 30%. You can also see changes of around minus 30% between rural developed and around minus 25% between urban developed areas. So this is the best strategy. I would say we should have 4 paragraphs here for each of these areas. And starting with the urban developing world, because this is substantially different from the others, especially insofar as it is the only area which has seen which is expected to see an increase. So our second paragraph might begin like this. We can clearly see that the biggest change expected by 2025 is an almost 100% increase in the number of people living in developing cities. I think the other 3 areas, because they all range in between 25 to 30%, maybe we can put them all together. So we can have only 2 paragraphs, I think. So the second paragraph is, all the other areas are expected to see a decrease in the population of between 25 to 30%. So this is a very good example of how a fairly complicated mass of figures can be digested into 2 simple paragraphs, making it quite clear to the reader or listener what is happening here. So last paragraph, why do you think these changes are likely to happen? Again, as in most diagrams which show social data, the reasons are fairly obvious. More and more people are moving into developing cities, especially cities in Asia, for example, like Bangkok, Shanghai, the capitals of other countries like Myanmar and Cambodia, because of greater job opportunities and greater facilities. Farming, which is the traditional activity for rural people, is becoming less attractive as a way of making a living. Okay, students, thank you for listening. I hope this has been useful to you, and I will be sending you part 3 of this course within the next 2 or 3 days. Goodbye.